I am Kim Miner, the CMO at Emapta, and I'm joined by Ingo Piroth. Ingo is our CRO, and he works closely with the C suite to modernize workforce strategy by aligning people, operations, AI, and our global talent models to improve efficiency, scalability, and business performance. And what I think makes Ingo's perspective especially valuable is his hands on experience helping guide organizations with their workforce transformation strategy along with the execution. And as we move throughout the conversation, please enter any questions you have where it says comments. I think that should be in the upper right hand of your screen. And to get us started, I'd love to hear where you're joining from and what challenges your organization might be dealing with right now. So while you're entering that, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to frame why this topic really matters so much right now. Outsourcing has evolved from a transactional model focused mainly on cost into a real workforce design strategy. Ingo, I feel like this is the most dynamic we've seen the industry in a really long time. Workforce strategies become a regular topic in the boardroom, and you're in those boardroom conversations. And that's a daily conversation I think you have with multiple clients what the smartest and most scalable way to get work done is. And I know that outsourcing is a critical component of that conversation. So how has outsourcing changed over the last few years?
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and good morning and hello, everyone. I've been in this industry for just over 30 years, doing everything from digital transformation to workforce transformation, outsourcing, etc. And I think historically, outsourcing is mostly framed as labor arbitrage. You're absolutely right. And people want to ask, how do I do the same work cheaper somewhere else? And I think that conversation still exists, but it's no longer the primary driver. I think today organizations are dealing with completely different sets of pressures simultaneously. So you think of talent shortages across the globe, margin pressure, AI disruption, which we'll spend some time on today, the operational complexity, and then, of course, aggressive growth expectations. And the conversation has really shifted from where can I hire cheaper to what is the smartest, fastest, and most scalable way to get work done. So we'll expand on that here today a little bit. But the value drivers that people are thinking about when they're considering outsourcing have really evolved dramatically. Cost efficiency still matters, but increasingly we're seeing organizations come to us for far more strategic reasons. For example, private equity firms are looking at post-sale margin optimization and operational leverage across their portfolio companies. And while outsourcing is part of that vocabulary, we're really talking about the kind of business outcomes that they're expecting and how we can help them through a transformation exercise. A lot of global organizations are trying to scale rapidly, which is hard to do unless you're tapping into global talent pools. And it's also hard to do without building really excessive operational overhead. International expansion itself is kind of synonymous with outsourcing. So if you're going to build a scalable workforce model, you have to include that. And of course, the big topic du jour is organizations are trying to modernize their workflows in preparation for or in response to AI enablement. And again, we'll double click on that here in a little bit, Kim. But I think fundamentally, it's a different conversation because now you're just not talking about labor, you're talking about workflow design, operating models, and all the kind of components that go into automation, AI enablement, and a global deliverable strategy all at the same time. And, I think we're entering an era where workforce strategy and technology strategy are becoming inseparable. So it's definitely a big time of change, Kim, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's an important shift because a lot of organizations, I think, are still operating from that old outsourcing mindset. So I think, maybe you can touch upon for us, Ingo, why those traditional operating models are starting to break as companies are starting to scale.
Yeah, people are really experiencing both industry trends as well as internal issues, whether they're growing, and I'll talk about those here in a second. And that is driving them to solutions, and outsourcing by itself is one of those. But if you think about workforce transformation, it's a more comprehensive answer to that. with more components. And so I think most companies were initially built for speed and growth, not long-term operational scale, and that's completely normal. I think the problem is that what works for 50 people often breaks badly at 500. And especially as organizations scale, if they've got rapid growth or M&A activity, the complexity compounds faster than the operational maturity they built into their systems to start with. And you start seeing disconnected systems, inconsistent workflows, duplicated work, and the reporting structures become unclear and who's owning what. And these are all fairly common things. And one of the biggest issues here is the lack of standardized operating models. In many organizations, individual business units or their acquired companies evolve their own processes independently over time. We see that everywhere. And then eventually they realize that there are 5 different ways to do the same thing across the enterprise. And therefore, you've got this drag around inconsistent reporting or rework or inefficient approvals, lack of scalability. You'll notice that I haven't mentioned just cost efficiency at all yet, but we're really talking about the nature of the work that's done, the business process. And so one of my favorite observations is, companies often scale headcount faster than they scale clarity. And in the process of considering outsourcing or workforce transformation as part of that solution, because leadership instinct is often let's hire more people. If all you've done is add more people into fragmented workflows, then you're unintentionally industrializing inefficiencies. And then, of course, when AI comes along, that's now exposing these issues because poorly designed workflows become painfully obvious the moment you attempt to automate them. So it's a huge moment of change. And designing, if you like, the right what it should look like is really what clients are looking at to answer, right?
Yeah. And I think there's also a lot of, exactly what does workforce design look like or mean? So maybe you can help frame that for folks.
Yeah, I think workforce design is about intentionality. It's really about intentionally architecting how the work gets done, not just who you hire, but where does the work happen? How do your workflows operate? Which activities should be automated? What requires human judgment or not? How do global teams collaborate? How technology supports all of it? There's a lot of questions that go into the modern workforce design ethos. And if you're purely looking at it in terms of, just the labor without looking at the operational workforce design, I think you're leaving a lot on the table. And, what we do is we typically try to guide our organizations through that, Kim, with some foundational questions that says, what does the current operating model look like? And what are your workflow bottlenecks? And what activities are repetitive or manual? And so as we ask these questions, that's where workforce transformation really becomes far more strategic than simply outsourcing labor, because that modern workforce blends you've heard this all the time, the P's: people, process, platform, automation, and of course these days AI enabled productivity. But that's what workforce design really means. And so when you partner with someone, you should really be thinking beyond the dollars and cents and looking at outsourcing becoming one component of a much broader operational strategy. And we love helping our clients do that kind of work, Kim.
Yeah. And how do you answer the question of, can I just hire my way out of my talent gap? Can I just bring on more people?
Yeah. And this is an odd question to ask someone who works in the industry of hiring people. But I think the answer is more complex than nuanced. And I think eventually coordination complexity simply catches up with you if all you're doing is you're trying to hire your way out of it. I think hiring more people can absolutely be part of the solution, including through outsourcing and global workforce expansion, but only if the underlying operating model is designed correctly. And I think that's the main thing right here. If you're simply scaling inefficiency by hiring more people without looking at the management overhead, the communication overhead, the onboarding process, the reporting structure, the workflow dependencies, and all those kind of things, you're actually scaling activity instead of scaling outcomes. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I see our clients do is assuming labor alone solves those operational bottlenecks. But in most cases, the real issue is the fragmented workflows, the ownership. We talked about some of these already here before. So, workforce transformation in the context of adding more labor is the concept of intelligently redesigning how that work gets done. That's what we call workforce transformation. And it goes well beyond just saying, hey, I need 10 more people in a cheap labor market. If you're doing outsourcing correctly, it becomes much more than simply labor augmentation, Kim.
Yeah, for sure. And you've kind of mentioned AI throughout, our discussion so far. So let's go ahead and go there, because everyone's talking about AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just said, you can't take certain aspects of a redesign in isolation. And I think that works with AI as well, right? AI alone isn't enough. You've got to have the culture, the workflow, AI, and scalability all together, all interconnected, right? In how they operate and perform for a company. And you've definitely, Ingo, been involved with implementing many of these workforce modernization projects. So can you expand on AI and where it fits?
Yeah, and this is the question du jour, obviously. And I will tell you right off the bat, if you're listening to this and you're really worried that you're behind the eight ball for AI, I can tell you with some certainty that there is only a small portion of the market that has really got this figured out. So it's a changing dynamic for everyone. And I think the bottom line, as far as it fits into our conversation today, is that AI is not just changing job; it's changing the workflows. And the biggest mistake I see organizations making right now is just trying to bolt AI onto the broken operational models. This, by the way, is the same thing that's happening on the technology side. Just buying AI without the kind of correct, if you like, infrastructure or data modeling plumbing that's required to do it correctly is not going to get you to a magic AI outcome. And, if you're automating dysfunction, you simply create faster dysfunction. And so, to me, and for our clients, AI works best when it's embedded directly into the workflows and the decision making process. And what we're seeing most of the time is organizations beginning workforce transformation conversations specifically because they realize their operating model are not AI ready. One of the things we try to help companies understand is that before they can meaningfully scale AI, they first need operational visibility, workflow clarity, ownership alignment, process maturity, and at least the baseline understanding of how work actually flows today. We'll talk a little bit later in how we help direct clients to do that. But this is typically where we start doing, operating model reviews and workflow diagnostics so that we can help clients really think about where this AI piece is going to come. And let me give you a couple examples, Kim, to actually try to make this come alive. When we're talking to a client, which we do a lot in finance and accounting, in finance operations, we need to see companies that are dramatically reducing manual cash application work using platforms like High Radius or Blackline by automatically matching invoices and process remittance data. They need to resolve exceptions automatically and eliminate large amounts of repetitive reconciliation effort. Nowhere in that comment did I just say you need to hire more people or do outsourcing. It is in the process of hiring more people and designing your outsourced global workforce that you have to look at these kind of use cases to see where AI is going to change those kind of things so you can design for the future. In customer support environments, a lot of the AI driven ticket routing and workflow orchestration are really helping organizations automatically classify requests, prioritize urgency, what they're working on, suggest responses, reduce handling times before human agents even engage. Again, that is a workflow that we're helping design around the elements of AI processes and the impact that they have. So as you are optimizing for that workflow or that work force of the future, you're designing it with AI in mind. And that's why we've really created a large part of our organization to help clients navigate that as they're moving that way, Kim.
Yeah, and that's such an important message. I think, so many people are experimenting and they're struggling with how do I operationalize that and capture some value on it. So, making sure that they're fixing their operational foundation first and then bringing AI to bear at the organization is one of those things that really move them along to seeing that
Yeah,
value coming from that experimentation, right?
absolutely.
Um, yeah, and many I think aren't really sure what a modern global workforce actually is. So maybe explain that. Like, how does it look like? How do they, put some idea of where they can go with it? What does a modern global workforce model look like?
Yeah, I mean, this is a complex question. A globally designed organization that takes into consideration extending your overall business culture, the workflows that you've got, and designing it in such a way that you've built in redundancy, workflows, technology, workflow ownership, standardization, and all those other components. It is going to be different for lots of different types of clients, to be honest. Depending on your side, complexity, and the type of work that you're involved in, that operating model, the organization of the future looks like is going to be very different across the board. So it's something that we help design from a custom perspective with most of our clients, I would say.
So as you're going in and working with clients, what are you seeing that they're getting wrong today? Where do they need to be focusing to solve some of these issues?
Yeah, and I will probably say, at the risk of repeating myself a little bit, that there's kind of three primary areas that people get wrong. And you never want to point this out with a client, but they're kind of learning points, I think. The first and biggest mistake is that they're treating outsourcing purely as a cost play. And I think when organizations focus on labor arbitrage, which is an important part of this, they often miss the much larger opportunity around scalability, operational leverage, this workflow optimization that we talked about, and increasingly access to specialized global talent. I mean, we're finding certainly labor shortages or the inability for clients to find the talent they need to be a primary driver here for doing this kind of work. So don't just purely treat it as a cost play. The second mistake is treating AI like a standalone innovation initiative. And we have a lot of clients who have got like an AI committee, and unless that's integrated into the rest of the organization, the workflows we just talked about, it typically fails. And I see a lot of organizations buying AI tools before they've even mapped the workflows that they're trying to improve. So all you end up with is an automation layered into ambiguity. We've seen companies deploy lots of AI platforms while they're still lacking this ownership, the process, the standardization, and the operational governance. And I think that the third mistake is, if you're trying to scale already broken workflows by simply outsourcing them, you're unintentionally creating what I like to call, the digital duct tape. I'm fixing this problem with scotch tape and bubble gum because you're layering tools, people, approvals, and systems on top of a lot of operational chaos. And as you're designing for the future, this is a perfect opportunity where technology can absolutely accelerate workflows, but it can also create dysfunction if that ownership and process maturity are missing. So three areas that I think are really important to consider. It's an integrated approach that works best, Kim.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's flip it a little bit then and say, you see firsthand a lot of successes that companies have as well. So, what are companies achieving when they do get workforce design right?
There's many ways to tackle this topic, so let me perhaps hit the top of the waves here. I think most importantly, when organizations get it right, you see compounding operational advantages, not just lower cost, but faster execution, higher productivity, better scalability. Obviously, we talk to a lot of clients that are looking for, the improved customer responsiveness, a better employee experience so that you're driving down retention and creating this move from tribal knowledge to institutional knowledge. And then
Mhm.
a lot of the things that we're seeing, especially in today's environment, is more resiliency during periods of change. But one of the biggest advantages that I like to talk about is that organizations really begin operating as an integrated global enterprise rather than a disconnected regional team or outsourced silos. And when workforce design is done correctly, offshore teams don't feel external. They become a seamless extension of the organization's workflow, culture, which is very important, and operational rhythm. And so you can think of different ways to measure this, but if you've got more continuity, more consistent execution, and improved knowledge sharing across a broader business coverage, then you've laid the foundation for evaluating your workforce transformation initiative or your outsourcing beyond dollars and cents. And it means that you can grow revenue faster or you can hire faster. And done properly, workforce transformation really becomes a growth strategy, not just an efficiency strategy, Kim.
Yeah. And you mentioned something for the first time in your conversation there about culture. And I think that's an important thing that maybe we spend a moment on, because I really appreciate that culture is included, as you can see on the screen there, in the operating strategy, because we do hear a lot, right, Ingo, of clients or organizations overall who are still worrying about that global or distributed teams really weaken a culture. So is that a valid concern?
Is it a valid concern? It is a big concern because the way that Emapta looks at it is that culture is a fundamental piece of doing outsourcing right. And let me perhaps expand on that a little bit. Where you've got clients that are extending their work into geographically dispersed areas, the need for aligning your corporate culture to that part of the organization is critical. I cannot stress this enough. If you're continuing to look at the work that your team is doing from an offshoring perspective as a separate part of your organization, you're going to expose yourself to failure. So you need to design it with principles around distributed agile. You need to design it around respecting the cultural aspects of the local region that you're in, but creating clear visibility and recognition opportunities, as well as career pathing for people that are working in this kind of offshore environment. We've specifically designed programs to address culture as a central tenet of the success of any outsourcing part of the organization you have, all the way from building out custom offices to doing locally relevant recognition. So, for example, in some
Mhm.
cultures, they don't like to be singled out for recognition. They like to be recognized by the team. They don't like monetary rewards. I mean, everybody likes monetary awards, but my point is there are different ways to define what makes a successful and happy part of the organization. And so this is a very, very important element of making outsourcing successful, Kim.
Great, and thanks there. And I know that one of the big questions as we kind of move along here of how can you get started, and some of the typical feedback is they feel like they're behind, right? Like even with AI adoption, there's some undeclared race, right? Like, and everybody feels like they're behind. So for those who are still struggling, which I think there are many, right, with where to get started, where do you guide companies to how to get started on their journey and go?
Probably one of the more important topics we talk about. Most companies already know something needs to change, but what they often lack is visibility. So to me, the best starting point is usually not a massive transformation initiative. It's understanding how work actually flows today. And we typically encourage organizations to start with three foundational areas. Number one, establish a baseline of the current operating model. Number two, identify the workflow bottlenecks and operational friction that they see. And then number three, understand where the scalability challenges are really emerging. And from there, we help clients evaluate which work is manual, which processes are fragmented, where are you duplicating effort, and where is there automation, AI, outsourcing, and workflow redesign that can be applied here. I think one of the biggest breakthroughs for the leadership teams is simply gaining that operational clarity. And, very often organizations subsequently discover, hey, you've got very highly skilled employees buried in low value admin work, or you've got multiple teams solving the same problem differently. I mean, this is not news when it comes to workforce and process redesign. But I think if you're looking at expanding globally and leveraging outsourcing as part of that, that level of visibility is really where clients should be starting. And this is phased, not chaotic. You identify the highest friction areas, the highest impact opportunities first, and build momentum from there. And we often run workshops where the leadership suddenly realizes that these three different teams are doing all this work, the manual reporting is consuming operational bandwidth, and there's this moment of operational clarity that happens. That is the real starting point. Now, obviously, I'd be remiss to tell you Emapta doesn't have a 6-step process where we do this kind of work for clients. But beyond kind of pitching that, it's understanding what you're getting into through a lens of someone that's informed and knows what to look out for. That is the main starting point.
Great. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit here as we wrap it up, how organizations can, get started on the journey. And I do certainly appreciate, Ingo, all of your insights today and the conversations you're having with companies about implementing this kind of strategy, right? So we want to offer to you today a complimentary workforce diagnostic or workshop with your team. Let us know if you're interested in that. We can certainly talk with you about how to evaluate, how to scale more efficiently, integrate AI more effectively, and really rethink your perspective on your workforce, right? So let us know if you're interested in that. But as a follow-up to this, we will be sharing with you our Workforce Transformation Advisory Guide, and certainly look forward to having future conversations with you on this topic. So thanks for joining our live today. We certainly appreciate it.